Hey, I'm Dan, and if you're new to homebrewing, so am I. And welcome to my adventures in homebrewing. Hey, everybody, it's Dan, and it's that time once more to go around the world one more time and have a beer or two along the way. Thank you very much for tuning in. So I gotta say thanks to Fred and Melissa for being on the show last week. Um, we were having a little bit of issues with the audio, so give me a little bit of time to get that stuff out there, mainly because I am having to splice through a lot of dead spaces because internet was lagging on both ends. So it kind of sounds like a stop kind of conversation, which gets a little frustrating at times. But honestly, talking to Fred and getting to know him, awesome guy. It's pretty impressive what someone who is visually impaired can go and make beer the way he does. And with the guys with the homebrew happy hour, uh, he placed in I think he said the top 16 of their homebrew competition. To me, that's pretty impressive. So we'll be talking to them later on down the road and things like that. And there's a couple cool new projects coming along the way. I do have a Berliner Weiss working away in a glass carboy. So if anyone has any advice on making Berliner Weiss, let me know because I don't see a whole lot of activity in the fermenter. It's bubbling away, but it's not a whole lot of activity. But we're moving on to today. So this week we are going to talk to Mississippi Malting Company. So they are a brand new company that's going to be officially opening hopefully sometime soon down the road in Pakenham, Ontario, and they're going to be doing craft malt. So we have craft beer, which is like a lot of love, a lot of dedication into it, and here's something that we all use that's going to be going into our beer with the same amount of love, the same amount of dedication, and a passion for beer. So we're very fortunate to have the owner, Dean, with us. Dean, how are you, bud?
Great, man. And thanks so much for inviting me on the show. This is fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much for agreeing to it. You like we were saying before in our little talk, is you have no idea how excited I am to have you open up because I got a feeling I'm going to be coming to see what can I take for a sack or two along the way to go home. Because I am so excited to get like real craft malt into my beer.
Oh, man, I can't wait to have you for a visit, take you for a ride around the field in the combine, give you like some
Oh,
firsthand experience where
nice.
this comes from, and then have a beer at the end of the day with you, watch the sun go down. That'd be
Nice, brother.
fantastic.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's kind of funny how I got here a little bit. Like I'm an accountant by trade, and I specialize in financial crime investigation. And anyways, that had me on the road quite a bit. At the same time, my wife and I took over our family farm that's been in our family for a few generations, and I had this crazy notion that I wanted to start farming again. So I did that. We did that and bought some equipment and grew. And I thought, well, I'd like this to be a bigger part of our lives. I'd like to be more back home. How can we do that? And we looked at different things like maybe grow the footprint of our farm, but that just didn't really fit with us. So we started to think about like how can we add value to the crops that we're growing here. And in any ways, I don't know exactly how it happened, but I landed on this idea of malting barley. So that's sort of where I guess the idea it germinated, to maybe use a bad pun perhaps, but anyways, so I thought, well, like the first step is, if I'm gonna malt, then I should probably know a little bit about my customers, so I should start to brew beer. And that was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And I thought, like, worst case scenario, at least I learned how to make my own beer, right? Even if
It,
nothing else
it's a
works
rabbit
out.
hole. Once you start, it's a nasty spin for
Oh
what
yeah,
you
I
accumulate
saw.
for gear.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I think I saw Alice and the cat down that rabbit hole. I got
Yep.
in pretty deep. Anyhow, so we just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and now we have this like amazing facility that's almost ready to start, and a grain full of nice 2 row raw barley to malt, and we're literally probably days away from pressing the go button now.
Nice. That's awesome. So you were saying the investigative side of accounting. Are you talking things like FinTrack?
Yeah, like financial crime
Okay.
investigations, that type of stuff. Yeah.
My former life, I was a military intelligence operator.
Oh,
So
neat.
so I dealt with FinTrack and all those guys every now and then down the road doing stuff. So I know
Oh,
I have
cool.
an idea what you did. So we'll move
Yeah,
on to what
that'll
we're
be a
actually
neat
supposed to be talking
conversation
about.
for a beer someday.
That's it. So um how about we talk about what the process of making like of making like malt is like? How do you go about it? I mean, it's not just go and you harvest it, you dry it, you killing it, you kill it, kill it, kiln it, and then away you go. There's got to be a lot more to it.
Yeah, it's really cool because like at the heart of it, it's really, really simple, right? Like you're letting a seed start to germinate, and at a certain point you're stopping it. But there's just a ton of biochemistry that's behind that, right? Like it's sort of like the rabbit hole, right? Like the deeper you look, the more you learn, the more you realize there
Mhm.
is to know. But you're right in the first steps. Like it's like as a farmer, when we're growing grain, you put it in the soil. You need the soil to be warm and be moist. So you're kind of mimicking that in the malt house a little bit, right? When you hydrate the grain in water, you steep it, get the moisture up to 45%, let it continue to germinate under really nice controlled conditions so you get consistency and good quality. And then at a certain point, when the grain is germinated just to the right extent, you dry it down to stop that process. And then you can, like you mentioned, kiln it to get different colors and
Mhm.
flavors and other processes. But it's quite simple, I guess, in principle, but very complex at the same time.
Okay. So when you're hydrating it, is it inside of a vessel? I mean, I've seen um documentaries. I'm going to sound like one of those guys. I've seen documentaries where they've
Yeah.
actually had the malt on floors and they're hydrating it and they're raking it and things like that. Or are you using an actual vessel to get it to where it needs to be for its hydration and then
Yeah.
draining it?
Yeah. No, you're right. Like there's different styles of malting for sure. Floor malting is one that you see like a lot with craft maltsters. But quite often, even when you're floor malting, the first step is to hydrate it in some kind of a vessel, right? Like in like ours and a lot of them, they almost look like a conical fermenter. Like they're very, very similar. Like so, it's a conical style vessel. Um, you usually have the ability to, or often you'll have the ability to control the temperature of the water that goes in. So you put your grain in, fill it up with water, and let it soak. And some of them have, and ours has the ability to aerate it to keep the oxygen levels up, and some other sort of environmental controls around it. So you let it soak for a certain period of time. You drain that water out and let it just rest in what they call air rest.
Mhm.
And you go through that cycle a couple times until your grain gets up to about 45% moisture. And it's all about like keeping the grain healthy, controlling its germination environment.
How do you keep it from going like rotten? Because I know like if things get too damp or too hydrated or whatever, they begin to rot. How do you avoid that?
Yeah, like for our system, anyways, like that can happen. So when it's soaking in water, we have air injection that injects oxygen and keeps that dissolved oxygen level up nice and high. When it's air rest, there's a CO2 extraction blower that sucks clean air down through the grain bed and extracts the CO2, and that's all to keep that the grain respiring really nicely and keep it nice and healthy as it's going through the steep cycle.
Is it the same kind of process for wheat malt? Because I'm assuming barley and wheat are it's got to be two different steps.
Yeah, the process is the same. The times may vary a little bit, but essentially you're doing the same thing. You're allowing it to germinate, right? And so that when it starts to germinate, that starts to activate enzymes, starts to break down the cell walls and the beta glucans, make that starch available then to us brewers, right, to be able to
Mhm.
convert the sugars and then ultimately to ferment. So it's quite similar, Dan, but with just some of the parameters around time and that change and temperatures change a little bit.
Okay, so why don't you tell us about some of the gear that you have in the background? I mean, that's a lot of nice shiny gear behind you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So this system that we bought it from a company called IPAC in Wisconsin. They manufacture this stuff. It's a fully automated malting system. What that means is essentially you have like different malt recipes that you program in, and so you program in all the parameters in terms of like times and temperatures and humidities, and the equipment will heat and cool and humidify and do everything it needs to do to try and stay within those parameters. It's a modular system, so we have one steep tank, and because the malt's only in there for a couple of days, it'll supply up to 3 germination and kilning vessels, and that's the piece that you're looking at, Dan, there. And so then it goes into that germination and killing vessel. It's there for the rest of the week. That controls the environment. It reads and monitors the moisture and humidity are going in and likewise coming out. And it'll turn on a sort of furnace, glycol chiller, misting chamber as it needs to maintain that. And then everything is data logged so that you can see how it's trending or look back if there's issues and troubleshoot. And it's all web connected as well, so that our manufacturer can help us out if we need help. There's another malt house in Saskatoon called Maker's Malt. They have the same equipment. So Matt is out there, fantastic guy. He helps me out a lot here too.
Nice.
You can log in and see how things are going, and then we use Aaron McLeod down at the malt quality lab at Hartwick College for all our testing. So he tests all our grain coming in, and he'll test all our malt going out. So he can even log in and see
That's fantastic.
the data from our last batch of malt or parameters. So yeah, we're pretty lucky to have the system.
So what are you looking at for making for malt? Are you looking obviously a 2-row, but are you looking at doing a Pilsner, any specialty malts?
Yeah, we'd love to. So I think we're going to start out with something that's fairly simple and straightforward, something that's pretty universal in terms of its use. So maybe like a pale malt, something like that. We'll get that dialed in. And then, but what really excites me is the collaborations and the experimentation. So whether that be different malt recipes, different types of grain, even different varieties of barley or different types of grain, rye, wheat, whatever people can dream up, and doing some of these one-off projects, I think is going to be really, really cool.
So, what was I going to say? You ever have one of those moments where you want to ask something and all of a sudden it's like squirrel and it's gone?
Yeah, the train lost its caboose, right?
Exactly. I was just like, I was about to ask something that was going to be very intuitive, and I'm just like, oh.
Well, I can add on to my last thought while you continue.
All right, let's do that.
So one of the things that really excites me about being a farm/malt house is the ability to take a project from start to finish. So like if somebody has interest in like a heritage grain or something a little bit different, set aside a plot of land, grow it, harvest it, malt it, and then ultimately send it off to the brewery. So I think that's going to be a really fun part of the project for us.
So what would classify as a heritage grain?
Well, there are a few different varieties of 2-row barley that are pretty like universally used in North America, right? And there's a few more on the way, but these would be things I think that you really don't see commonly in production agriculture anymore. So, if you can find a grain from that was used 100 years ago, right, and you find a source and build that out, and so there's a group, Sprott Labs in I think they're in northern Michigan, and they've been doing a lot of work on heritage grains, and they actually have a little home malting system as well. That's pretty cool.
Oh, nice.
But love to work with those guys and just sort of experiment, see what grows well here and what could produce like ultimately some pretty interesting beer.
Okay, so you were saying that you started off getting to understand the malting world by becoming a home brewer. So
Yeah.
how far down the rabbit hole did you fall when you got into brewing?
Well, I set myself up from the start with a grain father and a couple conical fermenters and then just like a simple kegerator system.
Mhm.
And and then I just sort of kept building on that, and eventually, like, our laundry room became a brewery, and that brewery became like a pub, and
Yep. Yep.
and then the grain father got a sparge water heater, and then just so on and so on and so on. So
Yep.
uh,
Sounds like my garage. So right now I've got three conicals. I have a glycol chiller on the way. Uh,
nice.
I have got two wine fridges in the basement that I use for storage of ingredients and things like that. I have a kegerator, more kegs than I know what to do with. And now so my wife's like, "So when are we opening the brewery?" I said, "I'm not opening a brewery. I already have it."
That's right. That's right.
Because I use like I had a Robo Brew and then I killed it. And then I bought a new one, which is actually working really well so far. So
Oh, good.
hopefully things keep going that way because I can't keep affording to replace gear.
Yeah, yeah. It's not cheap, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, grain followers are a great piece of kit. I mean, for what you're spending, it is like a Cadillac. I've got more of like a Pinto.
Well, it's a yeah. The all-in-one systems, I think, are really, like, I find they're really great for somebody getting into it. Like, for
Hmm.
me, getting into it was really great. Like, it was kind of, I found it was kind of daunting to get into it. Like, I had some home brewer buddies and colleagues, and they would talk about it, and like, I don't know, like, what's sparging or what's like the technical terms, but actually, like, it made it really accessible for me. I didn't have to sort of like home craft a bunch of different gear that I didn't really understand in the first place. I
Hmm.
could, you could start out, and I found, like, if you're careful about what you do, you can make some really good quality beer pretty much right away. You might not be able to make the same one twice, but you could make some pretty different drinkable beers right
That's
away.
true. It's all about keeping track of your recipe and your notes and everything
Yeah,
else,
that's
which
right.
I'm very bad at doing. I just roll with it. I'm like, if it happens, it happens. If not, I'm still gonna drink it, but it might not be what I remember. So,
Yeah, I'm a bit of a data geek, so yeah, I kind of like write everything down.
well, I admit I'm a gadget geek, so I have two tilt hydrometers that I drop one into each conical, and when I'm fermenting, and just let it
Right.
roll.
Oh, I
And
like.
the data gets fed into the software I use so you can see what the trend is, how warm it is, how fast it's dropping. So, which is a lot of fun to watch. But sometimes I'm like, well, I just want to see it, how active it is, and put a blow off tube and just watch it roll and bubble all over the floor. So it's all fun.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would love to come visit and see your setup when we're allowed to do that again. That,
Anytime, man. Anytime. I have more beer than you can shake a stick at. Right now,
you're
I'm
gonna
I'm trying to give away 10 gallons worth of bourbon stout.
that becomes a problem, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when it comes time to kiln the actual malt after you've hydrated it, you've done the whole 9 yards. How long
Yeah.
does it have to kiln for? Is it a matter of hours? Is it a day?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a learning process for us. Like, it's a matter of hours, I think, but I think there's a bit of seasonality to that,
Mhm.
maybe, and a bit of, like, depending on your grain variety and wheat varieties and stuff. So I think that's something that's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for us. We'll have a starting point with Matt's help and that'll be good. But some close monitoring and a little bit of trial and error, and I think that's like part of the fun of it as well, right? Is the experimentation and
Absolutely. So is everything that's going to be malted going to be coming from your property, or are you going to be bringing in some malt in from other areas?
yeah, we're going to be bringing it in. So we have 50 acres here that's tillable land on our home farm. So that might produce somewhere between around 75 tons of grain with one of these systems, and we can add two more to it. It's modular that way. One of these systems will be doing a couple hundred tons a year. So This year I planted 10 acres here of Esma barley, which is a new variety that's designed for our area, a
Oh,
new malt
nice.
variety. Yeah, and we planted 80 acres across the road from us and my neighbor's farm, and we have a couple other farmers growing for us as well. So yeah, that's part of the fun of it too, right? Like for me, because like I have a real passion about agriculture and
Yep.
I love craft brewing and I love home brewing, and this is like the intersection of
Mm.
those those areas. Right?
So how long has the farm been in your family? Is it like a generational farm or?
Yeah, it goes back to I guess my great grandparents who first came out to the farm here. And they were from nearby Carlton Place, which is not that far away, and in any ways they moved out to this farm, and it's been in my family ever since.
Nice. So this is such a niche thing. I mean, and I get it. You're into agriculture, experimentation, everything else, but it is quite the leap to take from doing what you're doing for your normal day job into doing this. I mean, how much of a daunting task was it to actually go about and sourcing and figuring everything out?
Yeah, it was it's a lot of work. Yeah, like, yeah, a lot of people sort of ask me, or they would read our business plan and they would say like, why aren't more people doing this? And my answer is because it's difficult, right? Like it's a lot of work. So I think we've probably been like seriously working on this for 5 or 6 years between like the concept and what does that look like, and is there a market, and then how will we finance something like this, and then ultimately sourcing equipment and the build. So it's a big process for sure, but I think the timing is perfect. In Ontario, there's Barnell Malts who does a fantastic job, but there's really not too much else in the way of craft malts. But we actually are able to grow some really good malting barley here, and that's going to continue to get better as we have new varieties. So, and of course, our craft brewing scene is just on fire. There's
Oh
just so
yeah.
many awesome breweries around, right? So the timing is great that way, and then just for me personally, it was the right time to start doing something a little bit different too, and that's sort of how it came to be, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we've got like two new breweries that are opening up in Ottawa, or one is open and one is in the process of opening. Shiloh Brewing is opening up in Ottawa on Serval Avenue.
Right.
Then on Saint Laurent Avenue, just above, I believe, Montreal Road, we have Good Prospects Brewing that just opened up. So our beer scene has exploded. So right now, and if I remember right from my beer tour guide days, is that I think right now we've got a total, I think 42 to 45 craft breweries in Ottawa proper alone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's crazy to think about the potential for you to get your product out there. That is like wild.
Yeah, like we'll be just a drop in the bucket in terms of the malt that craft breweries are using locally. So that's kind of cool. And but one of the things that I would love to see is, I kind of wanted to build this to be a model, right, for others to say like, there's opportunity here. Like, here's how we did it. And I think it's sort of like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of scenario, right?
Mhm.
Kind of like the craft brew industry, not to the same extent, but similarly, right? As farmers and as community members, can we just get things a little bit more local, a little bit more traceable, sustainable, and at the end of the day, maybe we can make better beer. I hope that's the case.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So what makes a craft malt? Is it the size? Is it what the process? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I think it's generally the size. I'm sure somebody has defined it out there somewhere, but I think generally speaking, Dan, yeah, it's the size. Like the process varies so much between different malt houses. Like here in Ontario, there's really, I think, only going to be a couple of us at the moment anyways. And in Barn Owl is a floor malting, ours is a pneumatic malting. But when you look at North America and especially in the US, there are a lot of craft malt houses there, right? And just like a real variety of from like home built systems to like professionally designed systems in that. So I think it's more the size, and I don't know really where you draw the bar because, like again, in the U.S., there's some fairly sizable craft malt houses down there
Mhm.
too. So, it's that, and then I wonder if it's also just a little bit about the philosophy and the mentality behind it, rather than being sort of production oriented at scale, economies of scale. It's more of a a passion for what you're doing and roots into the whole industry and community around you and the whole ecosystem of this sort of beer and brewing, right?
Mhm.
From field to the ultimately to the glass.
Okay. So I'm having one of those moments. I can't believe this. This is twice in the same night. Oh,
Speechless.
yeah, that's a rare thing that I'm speechless. I tell you that right now. Usually, my wife usually has to tell me to shut up, so it's all good. But no, so are you planning on trying to get this into homebrew stores as well, or are you trying to just get it out to the local breweries?
Yeah, I would love to get into homebrew stores and even for homebrewers to come out here and visit us on the farm and kind of see where it all comes from. Check out the facilities. But I really like. I think the homebrew scene is like I think that's a real valuable source of critical feedback, right? Because and I, of course, I'm not a professional brewer, so I have no idea, but I have the idea that home brewers may have like flexibility that professional brewers don't always have in terms of experimentation
Mhm.
and doing some crazy small batch stuff, right? And trying things out. That could be like really great source of feedback for us and
Yeah.
ultimately help us develop some really cool, like larger scale projects.
Yeah, not a lot of the craft breweries that I've seen in the area have pilot systems.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm trying to convince the guys at Stray Dog that they need a pilot system, even if it's only like maybe a 10-gallon system. Just get
Yeah.
something where you can do experiments with for potential recipes to see what you want to do. That way you can say, well, I want to try this malt, want to try this malt from this producer or that producer, and then you have an idea of what you want. Now,
Yeah.
my big question is why did you go with you said mnemonic system vice floor malting?
Yeah. Like, well, for me, because you know, my wife and I are kind of like in our mid 40s when we're making this change. And hear Devin and how he wakes up in the morning and shovels over his malt. And then in the evening, he does it again. And I'm thinking, well, I might be able to do that today, but I don't know if I can do that in the long
the
term. And
the aches and pains of getting older. Yes, I
yeah,
know all about
I
that.
don't recommend it actually. The alternative is worse, I suppose. So, so that was part of it. It was like partly labor, partly just like like how controllable the systems are in terms of getting consistency and quality. Um, and then partly scalability because
Mhm.
like with this system it's we have a relatively modest footprint here. We're starting out with a system that does 3 to 3.5 tons a week. We can triple that production by just dropping two more systems in here if and as the market develops. So it was sort of like all those factors coming together that it just seemed to be the right answer for us.
Nice, 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 nice. Ah, man, I just keep looking at all that nice gear behind you, and I just get so jealous because I'm always like, I think that's every kid's dream is to have something like this in the beer world that you can call your own. I mean, be it you go and you go from homebrewer to pro brewer, or from homebrewer to maltster or to yeast producer. It to me, it's an amazing thing. I mean, I went from being a home brewer to not being a home brewer back into being a home brewer, mainly because
Yeah.
I got inspired to get back into it from where I'm working. So I'm assuming there was somebody who inspired you or something that inspired you to get into this.
Well, I guess like you know my family have always been entrepreneurs. You know, from you know, my aunt who had a you know a little store in town, and my dad and his brothers who ran a farm machinery dealership here in the farm for quite a number of years. So there was part of that. I think I just wanted to sort of follow in that tradition, maybe subconsciously in a way. I've always had a love for business, and that's how I got into sort of the accounting gig as well. And I love the idea of like, you know, building something for, you know, my family, for our community, for a larger brewing community. So I think it's just all of that played into it a little bit, Dan, and that maybe is what ultimately drove getting back into farming as well. And this is sort of just another step, right, forward. So.
Yeah. Well, right now, I think you're coming into the scene at the right time because not only with, say, like craft breweries, like, say, like someone the size of, say, like Bose or something else like that, excuse me, it's the demand for what your product is going through the roof. I mean, I know where we are, my boss Justin, who's one of the owners, but also our head brewer, he's putting in a malt order almost every 2.5, 3 weeks to make sure that we are have enough when it comes to do 2 and 3 batches of beer back to back. So I think
Yeah,
you're coming in
like
at the right time.
it's really good to hear that. But like yeah, I mean the amount of malt that we use in the Ottawa Valley is just incredible. You know, like a single brewery will, well, and of course you know that there's, you know, there's very different scales in terms of craft
Yeah.
breweries even here, but you know, a moderate sized craft brewery will use more than we can produce essentially here in this certain
Well,
side. So
a lot of them are like 15-barrel brew houses. So I know with Stray Dog, we just got a bunch of new tanks. So we have 2 7-barrel fermenters, 2 30-barrel fermenters, and 2 15-barrel fermenters. So
yeah.
all in all, that's 60, 15, that's 90 plus 14. So you're looking at 104 barrels worth of beer that we can produce in that place.
Wow.
So yeah, we burn through sacks of grain like you're drinking water. But I think if it was something like what you're producing, we would probably use that in the smaller tanks just so we can get the most out of it. Because I got a feeling if we went on a large scale, we would have to use so much of it. The cost of trying to recoup for using it would push the beer to a point where you're like, I may just keep this for myself type of deal. Because trying to
Well,
get someone to pay like $20 for a can of beer would be kind of crazy.
yeah, that's right. There may not be too many of those customers, right? But we'll see how it plays out. Like you know, like our malting costs may be a little bit higher. It's hard to know before you're operating exactly how it's
Mhm.
going to play out. Like you can do all the financial forecasts and models you want, but you know, how much natural gas are we really going to use, or electricity?
Exactly.
It's hard to know, but our delivery costs will be less, I would imagine, and so, you know, maybe it all kind of plays out so that it's you know, if not cost neutral, not too crazy. But the other thing that I love about like the Ottawa Valley and where we are and the amount of malt that brewers use is that it actually, I think, creates a pretty significant demand for specialty malts, right? And maybe
Mhm.
that's ultimately where we add more value. We'll see,
Yeah,
that,
especially malts are a great thing. I mean, two don't get me wrong, two of my favorite base malts, Pilsner and Turo, two of my favorites because burn through it like water.
yep.
But when it comes to certain types of English beers that I love making, I usually burn through like 9 pounds of Maris Otter. So
Oh yeah, like I always have like a 50 pound 5 pound bag of Maris Otter, Pilsner, and Pale Ale malt around in the brewery, right? Because
yeah,
we just go through that like crazy. And I think it'd be kind of cool to see if we could source out a grain that grows locally that would be like a Maris Otter, just like a really nice, flavorful base malt, and
Yeah.
dial
So
into the
are there
processes.
different types of I guess not every grain that you grow go can make the same malt. Do you need different barley or wheat or whatever else to make certain types of specialty malts or just basic malts?
Yeah, like so. I guess the answer is yes. Yes, but it's complicated. Maybe.
Okay. All
So
right. Yeah.
a lot of it comes down to process. So I guess at the very basic level, there's 2 row barley and 6 row barley. I
Yeah.
mean, there's others as well, but those are principally it, right? And it just sort of refers to the configuration of the grain on the heads of the barley, but the grains themselves are actually different as well, right? And so 6 row barleys typically have a lot more enzyme potential, so a lot higher diastatic power. They're also a smaller kernel size, and there's some literature out there that suggests that they may have higher precursors to DMS as well. So you need to boil a little bit longer and just take some care like that. And some literature out there suggests that maybe they don't have such good flavor development as the 2 rows, but you see them a lot in big commercial brewing where they're using adjuncts because they have that enzyme power to convert the adjuncts, right? And you see it in distilling for the same reasons.
Mhm.
So I actually have some 6 row here that I want to try just
Nice.
to right just to try it out. So we're going to give that a try, and then 2 row is the other variety, and that's what most of us craft brewers use. And there's a bunch of different strains of 2 row. So here in Ontario, traditionally it's been New Dale and Metcalf have been the two that are grown,
Mhm.
and if you're malting, then you'll turn that into Pilsner, Pale Ale, Vienna, crystals, like whatever, right? So it's kind of like it's not that New Dale's used for one thing and Metcalf for another. It's they're fairly interchangeable that way. And then out west, you see stuff like Synergy and Copeland and some of those varieties.
Oh, okay. Well, that's awesome. So, what are you working on for beer then? Seeing as you mentioned you're a home brewer, you got anything you're working away on?
Well, yeah, I am. It's a little bit of a pet project. My neighbor across the road that I farm with, he's a truck driver too, and I think the story was that he has this gear shift knob out of his like original tractor trailer, and it's a 13-speed gear shift. And
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
anything about trucking, but apparently that's something special. So
It's
he
rare.
likes blonde ale. I think that's right. So he wants a blonde ale and he wants to call it 13 speed. So we're
Nice.
on the third iteration of 13 speed right now, and
All
trying to
right
dial
on.
it in. But after that, I think maybe a black lager or something like that, like a dark
Ah,
might be
right
time
on.
to switch it up a little bit. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
how about you? What do you got on the go?
So, like I said before, I got a Berliner Weiss working away right now. Tomorrow is brew day, and I'm going to be using it my a new fermenter that I just got from Spike Brewing. Hello,
Oh,
Spike.
they're nice.
Yeah, I got a Flex Plus, so it's all cleaned out and sanitized. So I'm all excited to get beer into it. But I'm going to do something because was it last February? I spent the month of February in Scotland, and I was there to learn how to be a golf caddy. So this is before the lockdown happened. Yeah, I had everything all lined up. Once I was done, I was going to come home for a couple months. Then I was going to go back to Scotland for like 3 or 4 and caddy, earn some money, and then come home again. And but lockdown happened. So I kind of got my ass kicked on that. But
Yeah.
one of the beers I was enjoying a lot when I was there was called Bellhaven's Best,
Okay.
which is a very nice it's a nice amber, nice malty flavor, but very light on the ABV,
Okay.
which makes having more than one not so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I like those beers a lot.
Oh yeah. I mean, some of the beers I make are like between 6 and 7. So if I have one, I'm like, okay, I'm good for the night. Have
Yeah.
more than that, and you're like, it's sleepy time. you're sitting. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm not even halfway through the second one, and I'm like, oh. falling
Yeah.
asleep, and I'm getting like the poke, go to bed, go to bed. So I'm like, okay, I get it. So I enjoy the, don't get me wrong, a nice robust bourbon stout or or a sour or something like that. I'll have one and I'm good, but I enjoy it. And I think when beers hit that high of an ABV, if you're trying to have more than one, you're an extremely young person, because when you hit like me, because I'm turning 50, trust me, it doesn't go so well.
I'm starting to see signs of that. Yeah.
So do you have any more projects that you got geared up for the actual shop to make sure you're ready to open? Is there anything that you need to do?
We're pretty well there. We have a little bit work left to do on our bagging line. Um, and otherwise I've got to bring grain here to the home farm, load our silo. That's not such a big deal. And we're ready to hit the go button. Basically, we're just waiting for our friends at TSSA to give us the green light,
Yes.
and then it's all hands on deck.
Nice. Well, I think that's everything we could possibly cover. I think, unless there's something you want to share with us.
No, I mean that's really it. Really looking forward to getting out there and meeting some more of the brewers and meeting the home brewers, and
Hmm.
that's a part of the job that I think I'm looking forward to most, is just yeah, the collaborative nature of this industry, right?
When Orleans can have their home brew of their craft beer festival, you should come down to that. Bring a stand, set up, and you can show everybody what you do.
Count me in. I'll be there. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to say thanks for right now. And guys, this is Dean with Mississippi Mills Malting Company. And like I said before, I'm extremely excited to see this open, because I'm going to be like a kid in the candy store, because I'm going to go and see him whenever I can and get what I can out of him. And in return, give him as much beer as I can, which is a fair shake.
That's a fair
So
trade.
Dean, thank you very much for being on the show. It is greatly appreciated. Your time is appreciated. I'm like, I'm tongue tied how excited I am. I wish you the best of luck. Please stay in touch with us, and we will be touching base later on down the line.
Thanks so much, Dan. Come out and visit as soon as we're allowed to again.
Absolutely. So, guys, thanks a lot for coming along for the ride and a beer or two along the way. I'm Dan, and we got Dean with Mississippi Mills and Malting Company, and we'll see you on the other side.